Welcome, ladies and gents, to the 2019 Toyota RAV4. This particular model is the all-wheel drive XLE. And no, I do not have a window cracked in here. That's just the noise this car makes. I'll get to more of that in a bit. Before I start this actual driving segment, I want to first say that we actually previously owned the 2013 Toyota RAV4 XLE. That car costs about 25 grand, 24.5 or something like that out the door. This particular car with the all-wheel drive does sticker for about 33 grand. That's not cheap, and maybe you can get about a grand less than that if you went to a dealership. However, the price has gone up with this thing. It's not a cheap SUV anymore. But with that came a ton of great improvements. First off, being the exterior. This finally looks like an SUV. The previous generation, it legitimately looked like one of those small CUV type of things, like the CR-V. It had that traditional kind of CUV style to it. This finally, it has a similar like box rectangle-like shape that we find in something like a Highlander, even a 4Runner or something like that. They've done an extremely great job giving this SUV a more rugged feel and look to it. So I really like that. This model is only like an inch or two longer than the previous generation that we used to own. However, it feels so much more substantial from the outside. It actually feels like a full-size SUV from the outside. And when you get in, I'll talk more about this in the interior segment. However, the rear leg space has slightly been decreased, but a lot of that space has actually gone to the trunk space. It's much bigger in the previous gen, so that's great. But overall, it finally feels like an SUV. It's maybe like a half an inch wider too, but it feels so much wider actually on the inside. Again, like an SUV would. And the ride height of this has also been increased. So again, all of this feels much more rugged, and that's kind of what Toyota wanted. This is actually the most off-roady capable type of SUV that's currently out right now. There's 6 different modes here, eco, normal, sport, with snow, mud, and a rock dirt crawling setting, I guess. This is the all-wheel drive, but it's like the typical kind of all-wheel drive system you find in most vehicles of this segment. It sends about 50% of the power to the rear. I'm not super impressed with that. I'm not taking anything away from it. I haven't taken this vehicle off-roading, but I take their word for it. It's definitely the most capable in that regards. However, that's really irrelevant. I mean, this is a grocery getter. Let's be honest. These Toyotas, this entire segment, it's just a daily driver cruiser type of car. Nobody's going to take this off-road. However, I know why this is here. It's for marketing. It's for the people who buy these cars. They like to see a lot of buttons like that. Makes it feel like their vehicle is way more capable than it really is. I get it. It's more of a confidence thing than anything else, and to be able to brag to your friends I can do all this stuff. But it's really irrelevant. This is not some Range Rover. That aside, it is an excellent all-wheel drive system. But honestly, the main highlight to this SUV, for me anyway, especially coming from the previous generation, it's the handling. The handling of this SUV is by far the biggest highlight for me. This SUV is light years ahead of the previous gen RAV4s. It's not even funny. And that car, the one that we had, it came with these garbage Yokohama tires. They were just useless tires. You might as well just put sandpaper on the car, really. That was probably the biggest downfall of it. This has a more legitimate set of Toyo tires. No matter how hard I push this thing, I've had it in a bunch of different environments. I took it out on an on-ramp on a highway at really high speeds, like 50, 60 miles an hour. This thing didn't even chirp its tires. It's so impressive, this thing. It almost has a car-like handling to it. I know I said that they actually raised the ride height of this, but this handles so much better than the previous generation car. I mean, this is the biggest improvement ever. And the ride quality of this is so sublime. This is the XLE, so it actually comes with 17-inch wheels, so it rides really well. There are some 18s on offer. All the Toyotas, they all feel great on the road, and that's one of their biggest highlights. Other than the handling of this particular one, they all ride really well. Now, this vehicle still uses a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder. There are no V6s. I am fully aware of the fact that there is a hybrid model. I'll get to that in a bit. I haven't driven it, but I'll talk about it. This 2.5-liter 4-cylinder, though, this has been improved in power. It has over 200 horsepower, about 203 or 4 horsepower, and about 180-something pounds-feet of torque, I believe. That power increase, you're really not going to notice it that much on the road if you drove the previous car back-to-back with this. But it feels strong. It feels really good. I'm really satisfied with the performance of this. Is a great amount of power to have. You know, anything above 200 horsepower is really great for street driving. This car actually even sheds about 100 pounds over the previous car, which I find really great. And you know, this is the all-wheel drive model, so it does add about an extra 110 pounds, but you know, none of this you really notice. I'm just really impressed that it's at least gone down in weight, not up, despite all the extra options, features, electronics that this car has. It's still able to keep its weight down. I even believe that the hood is actually like aluminum in here. So there's a lot of great attempts at weight savings with this car. But more than the power increase, I think what's really noticeable over the previous cars is actually, and I know I keep referring back to the previous generation car, I just feel like a lot of those owners are really going to be looking into stepping up to this, and that you should. And another reason for that is because of this 8-speed transmission. The previous car had a 6-speed automatic. It really wasn't the best. This 8-speed, massive improvement. I really like the way this is tuned. Everything from the engine to the trans, it all feels very linear, and I really like that. There's no strangeness with it. It's a really nice setup driving this car on the streets. You know, this 8-speed, it shifts like butter. It shifts really well, actually. I love the performance of this, and for once, it actually gets legitimately good gas mileage. When I was doing the Kia Soul review, I was saying that turbo engine was able to get better gas mileage than some naturally aspirated 4-cylinders. Well, the NA 4-cylinder I had in mind was actually the previous gen RAV4. I was only able to get like 19 in that. In this car though, I was able to get like 24 average. With the way I'm driving, that's really impressive. And I think a lot of that has to do with this 8-speed, and it's done a great job. And there is a manual mode. It does work pretty well. It does auto upshift for you, but otherwise it's not bad. Toyotas always have that natural great feeling to it, nice and smooth. Same with the steering, really responsive, direct, but not overly weighted, not overly synthetic. It just feels right in here, and I love that. Now, I still haven't talked about the cons of this car. One of which, first of all, I guess I should mention the hybrid model. I already said I haven't driven that model. However, everyone's saying that that's the model to get. It's a little bit faster, fun to drive, obviously more fuel efficient. The fuel efficiency, I'm sure they're right about that. Toyotas do the best job with hybrid setups, and that's obviously been proven with the Prius and all that. That's been out for so many years. So you're probably going to be like doubling your MPG if you go for that model. And I guess the best part is it doesn't cost that much more. It's actually right in line with the gas models. I think it maybe costs like $2,000 more. However, people are also saying that's much faster, almost V6-like pulling power. I can see that as well. I drove a 2017 Camry hybrid, and that did feel really good. It pulled really well. On paper, it doesn't seem like a massive improvement over this model, but I assure you it probably is. So if power is what you want out of this thing, although this is extremely more than adequate, you're probably going to enjoy the pulling power of that more. Handling, obviously I can't speak on that. I love the way this thing handles. It's what blew me away about this thing. It's almost car-like. However, that thing weighs about 400 pounds more, about 3,800 pounds with the battery pack. It does come with 18-inch wheels. They are saying that that is the more sportier model, especially if you go for the XSE. I don't know how much that matters to you. I think really what matters to most people with that is the straight line power performance, and the gas mileage is obviously the selling point of that. However, I would counter that with, this is going to be the more natural driving experience for most people. This is going to be the more traditional driving experience that people are used to with Toyotas. And I think that's what I really like that Toyota did here. You know, Toyotas are the only cars that drive like a Toyota. And I know that's weird to say, but you know, some other cars, you know, like a Mazda CX-5 or something, that's going to drive better than this. Handling wise, it's one of the best handling SUVs in the segment, and even faster if you get the turbo model with that. However, you know, that car has that more Euro German driving feel, almost Audi-like driving feel, which, you know, a lot of people are going to love that. However, people who've driven Toyotas, and most people have, they love the way Toyotas feel on the road. And there's a good reason for that. It's set up really well. I already said that. It's very natural feeling. You know, there's no strangeness with it. If you step up to that hybrid, it is going to feel more strange. You know, it's going to be a CVT setup. It's not going to be your traditional driving experience, you know, despite the fact that it has good power. Some people are going to like that. This 8-speed is great. I think there's a lot to appreciate here. I will mention this before I go into the interior segment. The biggest con with this RAV4 is by far like the wind noise. It's probably the biggest con with almost every Toyota. You know, I reviewed the 2019 Corolla. There's a ton of wind noise. You know, I made the joke earlier when I started this review. It feels like you always have the window like half cracked here. There's a ton of wind noise that comes through here. There's tire noise, however, I could forgive that. That's more so like a white noise. It's not a big deal. This is really obnoxious. And just like with the Corolla, I had this thing out on the highway and it just didn't feel good. After anything past 70 miles per hour, it really starts to buff it and shake. Like even the wheels start shaking a little bit. I've experienced this with almost every Toyota except for the Lexus cars. The Lexus cars feel great on the highways, but the Toyotas just don't. It feels kind of wobbly. I feel like the wind just really affects these Toyota cars for some reason. It always like shakes around a little bit. It's not the most confidence inspiring at the highway speeds, but like I was saying with the Corolla and just like this, they feel great at 45 miles per hour at like, typical, city driving speeds. This is far superior to just about anything else in the class. I mean, there's such a relaxed feel. It's so comfortable. Even in the highway, it's still stable, but you just don't feel right with the thing kind of shaking around. I mean, I don't know if that's just something with this particular car, but just if you're thinking about buying this, just check it out. Perhaps the hybrid model with the extra added weight might feel a little bit more stable on the highway. I don't know, but just something to check out. But that's really the only two cons I could find with this car. Otherwise, it's a pretty much perfect driving experience. And no, it doesn't probably handle like the CR-Vs, like the Hondas or the Mazdas or anything like that, but it still handles really good. I really like the way this car drives. I think most people will, especially coming from other Toyotas. This has actually been one of my most favorite new Toyota car driving experiences I've had actually out on the road. So that says a lot. I'm really impressed with this thing. I can see why this thing sells so much. Over 400,000, similar to the Camry. I mean, it's outselling Mazda as an entire company, and for good reason. So nice car. I really like it, but just keep those cons in mind that I just mentioned to you. But with that pretty much concludes my driving segment. Let's get into the interior and talk about that because there's a lot to appreciate. So finally, inside of the new RAV4. Next to the driving improvements, the next biggest improvement that was well needed in the RAV4 was the interior space. And they've been doing this in all of the new Toyotas, but all new Toyotas are getting a huge bump in quality inside of the interior. The previous car that we used to own, and again, I'm going to be referring back to that car over and over, but that car had a real tin canny plastic feel to it. In this model, they were smart. Yes, it's still, a majority of the materials in here are still plastic. However, they did a great job breaking up all the colors. They added a bunch of different textures now. There's rubberized controls now for the climate control, tuning knobs, volume knobs, all that stuff. There's more of like a ridged type texture behind the door handles and things like that. And overall, in the interior, there's snowflake type of pattern design going around, even in the speaker grills, the seats itself, all that stuff. So just really nice touches that they gave this car to just stand out a little bit and be a little bit more special. They're going for that more off-roady, rugged feel to their SUVs now, and I think it's working. This is a pretty cool setup in here. Yes, up top here, there's a lot of hard plastics, but honestly, I really don't care about that. If you want to talk about soft touch material, check out this like armrest in the middle here. This is soft touch. You can make a pillow out of this. This is impressive. This is what soft touch really is. Not this, not whatever this faux leather plastic is. No, this is a soft touch material. So that's really impressive. And just overall, I think what Toyota has done here is they did something similar to what Cadillac did with the XT4. It just feels a lot more substantial than it really is. That Cadillac is a small little SUV, but it feels substantial. And that's really the only thing that matters in this SUV class. And I think Toyota has realized that, and that's kind of why they went for this rugged off-road feel. And I think it's working. I mean, this feels special now. The old one, not at all. It felt like an appliance. This one does not feel like an appliance, and that's a huge compliment. But like I was saying, even the door panels, obviously I love the color in here. This is a great color choice. Complements the exterior color really well, which I also love, which I didn't really mention. But plastic controls, there's a child lock feature. You control your mirrors from here. Overall, really nice door panel area. The seats themselves, Toyotas never have a fatiguing feel to the drive. A lot of that has to do with the seat comfort. I mean, the seats are so soft in here. Obviously, this is a cloth interior. I really like these XLE trims. This middle trim is really nice. Gives you a lot of what you need and not a lot of extra nonsense that you don't want. But I like cloth seats, especially in this genre of vehicle, because they're really easy to maintain and they're just so comfortable. They don't wear like a leather seat does. So this is going to look good for a long time. Plus, it's always just going to feel really comfortable to sit in. It's never going to burn you, or you're never going to be freezing yourself in here. So that's nice. Next, the steering wheel. I like that they gave this particular XLE like this leather-like trim to it, this leather feel anyway, with this kind of faux stitching going around. The previous generation that we had, it was just like a plastic steering wheel. We had to put like a leather cover on top of it. So to see them giving this to you like from factory is really nice. The controls are really easy to get used to, similar to the Kia cars actually. I mentioned in driving segment, this car is not cheap anymore. This car stickers for like 33 grand, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of features that they piled in here. The XLE that we had back in 2013, bare bones, had nothing going for it. The only option that I really had was alloy wheels. That was literally it. This car comes with a whole suite of, infotainment, obviously. It's got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. I mean, they stemmed away from that for the longest time because, obviously, to have Apple CarPlay and all that stuff, they actually gather all your information, your driving information. I guess Toyota for the longest time didn't want to have that. I guess they want to stay a little bit more private for their consumers, but the consumers don't care. You asked for it, they finally delivered. So Apple's your best friend, right? So you don't mind, giving them all your driving information? I guess not. So they don't care. Now Toyota doesn't care, so they just gave it to you because you've been asking for it. So there's that. And the overall infotainment itself, it's okay. It's not bad. I still think that the Hyundai Kia stuff and the Mazdas have a superior infotainment. I just like the way they work and look a little bit better, a little bit easier, but this is not bad. This is a pretty big step up from what they typically used to do. Now the gauges, like in typical Toyota fashion, they're really easy to read. You do have this little helper screen in the middle. This actually, because it's an all-wheel drive model, does show you like which wheel is getting the most torque and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, it's a 50-50 split, but just a little gimmick that they threw in there. It obviously shows you your MPG, all that good stuff. It's a nice little helper screen. It shows you some legitimately good information, so I don't mind that. And like I mentioned before, this car's littered with features. It's got all the safety stuff, which works pretty well in here, blind spot monitoring, all that good stuff, and the pre-collision assist, so that's good. It does come fully loaded with that stuff, so obviously there's some sensors and some upkeep with that in the long term, but there you go, it still comes with it, whatever. And I did already mention to you there's 6 different drive modes. I mean, I obviously just leave it in normal mode and call it a day, but there's some other modes like sport mode, that'll pretty much raise the RPMs for you, so you can waste a little bit more fuel. There is no physical parking brake in this. It actually does come with an e-brake, but I don't mind this because similar to my Lexus LS460 from 2008, it's got a similar implementation of, once you put the car in park, the e-brake will automatically engage itself. So I really like that. So it's a pretty convenient e-brake to use. And there is this hold function similar to my Lexus as well. So if you're in a drive-thru or something, you can have this button enabled and you don't have to keep your foot on the brake. You can actually take your foot off and from the brake and the car will still stay stationary as long as you have this hold button enabled. So that's a pretty nice little feature actually. Now this car does actually come with heated seats and a heated steering wheel, so I'm assuming that's probably because it's an all-wheel drive vehicle, but it's really nice. Yeah, you're paying quite a bit more than what you used to. However, you're getting a lot more for your money here, and the car overall feels much more substantial and special, and obviously comes with a lot of great features, so I do like that. And Toyota, much like the Hyundai Kia cars, they do a great job of separating the complete infotainment from the screen here. So the screen, you can just rip it off, throw it away. It's cool. You can still use your infotainment. I mean, you can still use your climate control. It'll show you your temperature, your fan speed, all that stuff. It's all controlled down here. Like I said, rubberized controls. Makes it feel a little bit more special to use, so that's great. I like that they kept the traditional shift lever here. So it's not like a digital shifter. It's actual cable link shifter. It's connected to the transmission, so that feels great. A lot of it is still traditional while still adding a lot of the electronic features that people come to expect nowadays. So I think they did a great job blending all that in while still remaining Toyota at the core. So that's great. And the last thing I'm going to touch on is a few things like this bezel-less mirror. I love that. Volvos have it. It's a great little thing because, it gives you just that much more mirror to see out of. And this overall car is really easy to drive in general. I didn't mention that really in the driving segment, but it's a really easy car to see out of and to maneuver around traffic. So that's great. And this big mirror does help with that. And underneath that mirror is actually a garage home link, so you can set up to 3 garages, so that's great. And you got a little SOS button, you know, buttons to control your sunshade and all that. And with that covered, I'm just going to touch lastly on the interior space. Lots of nice interior space cubbies. You know, Toyota's always been great about that. You know, the ergonomics, the amount of space that it gives you. You know, center console is nice. Lots of cup holders. You know, big bottles can fit in the door pockets. So really well thought out, designed interior space. I think it's really going to be easy for people to live with in the long term. So with that, let's jump into the rear seats and talk about that. Yes, so inside the rear of the new RAV4. So this is pretty interesting to talk about because the previous car, it had a ton of space in the back. If you had the seat pushed far enough forward, it felt like you were in a Maybach, basically. It was ridiculous, the amount of leg space it has. So I know in this generation, you know, they made it about like an inch longer or something, but that's really just for the exterior and actually for the trunk space. Now, for the rear occupants, the leg space has actually been decreased a little bit because the amount of leg space that the previous car had before, that was so unnecessary. No CUV needs that much leg space in this class. So this is still more than enough space, even though I'm like 5'11". You know, I can fit behind myself, no problems here. You know, I still have enough toe room basically, and leg space, not an issue at all. Headroom, fantastic in here. So I don't think anybody should have any real issues sitting back here. So I think Toyota, it was smart of them to give you more boot space and limit the amount of leg space because it was just unnecessary. I do like how rear occupants still have a nice climate control, some nice vents in the back here. So that's always a great feature, especially in this class of vehicle, to see that in. And the rear occupants obviously still get a very nice cloth seat here in the back, just as comfortable as it is in the front, and plenty of space for normal size adults. So I think this is a really practical car for most people's needs. Now let's take a moment to talk about that trunk space and end this review off. Yes, behind the new Toyota RAV4. So I think it's really smart of them to kind of limit the amount of leg space to give you all of this because, you know, this is the more rugged adventure SUV. So I guess people are going to be loading this up with canoes, tents, hiking equipment, whatever else. This can now fit all that stuff. This is really impressive how much space is back here, to mountain bikes, all that stuff, no issues whatsoever. I don't even think you have to fold down the seats, honestly, to fit a bike in here. Actually, no, I take that back. You probably do. But there's a really smart space, and it really makes it for that ultimate daily driver, if you will, because it can just haul so much stuff. And I like this privacy cover thing that kind of comes out. I think that's really smart. It's far better than that stupid piece of cardboard hanging on 2 pieces of string. That really kind of gets in your way. This doesn't. This kind of neatly tucks away back there. And if you're worried about this bar, you can, you know, it's similar to a toilet paper holder, you know, similar kind of mechanism. You kind of fold this in and it kind of comes out. And you can take this out to, you know, fold down the seats and carry larger items. So really convenient, really practical car. This is more than what you ever need. I mean, if you need anything more than this, I suggest maybe looking into like a U-Haul or something. I know a lot of the CX-5 haters are probably going to love this. Tons of space back here, so there is that. Now, this is a electronically operated tailgate only. If you try to force it, it's still gonna close on its own electronically. You shouldn't do that. You can open this with the key fob. Even though it's electronic, it actually works faster than, you know, the previous Toyota stuff did. It's not too bad, so I guess I forgive it, but I would still like to see, I would rather it be just like a manual closing thing. It would be much faster. But other than that, really practical car. I think a lot of people are going to appreciate this space. And with that, let's talk about the conclusions and end this review off. After spending an extended amount of time with the new RAV4, what do I think about it? After all this time, you know, it's obvious to me why the RAV4 sells in the numbers that it does. I mean, heck, we had one. This is just so much better. And I like the changes that they made. I mean, they made some really big improvements while still remaining true to what Toyota is all about, to the core of what Toyota is all about. And what is that? Just being a great road car that's comfortable on the road, that's not fatiguing, that's just reliable and dependable. And I saved the best for last. You know, the reliability, the resale value, the dependability of it. That's why Toyota can charge so much for their cars. I mean, it's just, people know what they're getting with this, and it's just, there's no mysteries here. And that's why it continues to sell so well. You know, with all the competition that's out right now, there's a lot of good competition out there. You know, the new CX-5, that's amazing. There's the CR-V, the Hondas, of course. Kia is absolutely killing it. You know, the new Sorrentos. You can probably get a V6 Sorrento for the amount of money that this thing costs, and you can get a base Telluride. That's a heck of an SUV right there. So There's a lot of cars out there, but even amongst all those great choices, Toyota still manages to be number one, especially in terms of sales. I was saying that the highlight of this new RAV4 was the way it handled, the way it drove. I mean, the chassis of this is amazing. It can just handle just about anything you throw at it. It's almost car-like in the way that it feels. That's a big compliment for an SUV, especially of this category and for Toyota in general, because they're not known for being the best driving car. So massive props to them for that. But regardless of this, people still say that the hybrid is the one to go for. I would say maybe not for the traditional Toyota buyer, because what they've done here is they made all those great improvements while still keeping the typical Toyota customer in mind. You know, when you go for that hybrid, you know, I just don't think it's going to be as reliable as this. You're going to run into some maintenance things. You're probably going to have to replace that battery in the long term, the CVT and all that stuff. So with this, it's way more traditional. There's no strangeness with it. It feels so natural. You know, the CVT might not be for everyone, you know, despite the amount of speed and the power that the hybrid probably has. This is more so what a typical Toyota customer is familiar with and might even go for. So I wouldn't just rule off the gasoline powered car yet. I would urge you to drive them both back to back. I mentioned the only two cons with this is that wind noise. That's the only thing that sucks about this. Toyota's dating back to a year 2000 Camry we used to own ever since I was a kid. Even that car had that issue. All Toyotas have this problem of when you get them up to the highway speeds, they all kind of have this buffeting issue. It doesn't feel quite as stable at 70 miles per hour and up. And it always feels like you have the glass half cracked for some reason. So those are really the only two things I would like Toyota to improve upon. Other than that, this is pretty much like a near perfect daily driver, to be honest. I mean, yeah, there's some other more sportier options out there like the CX-5 and the CR-V, but I think this is really going to continue to do well for Toyota. So with that, I mean, you know, if you're in the market, this is definitely one to check out for sure. I would like to hear thoughts from owners as well. So with that, that pretty much concludes my review. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Take care. Goodbye.